Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Charlie Reardon. I have the distinct privilege of serving as provost here at Hofstra University. I want to welcome all of you to today's event, actually a series of events. But it's great to have you here on this warm April tax day. So it's really my distinct pleasure, though, to open today's program, The Untold Stories of the Revolution in the Atlantic World, Haiti and Latin America, and to thank our colleagues from the Peter Calico School, the Hofstra Cultural Center, and many, many partners for bringing this important, very important conversation to our campus today. My sincere and special thanks to both History Chair Sally Charno and the Hofstra Museum Director Sasha Giordano, along with our colleagues from the Hofstra Cultural Center, for their creative and tireless efforts to bring this program to life. I want to take this opportunity, since you're here today, to enrich you in a number of different ways by drawing your attention to an additional event that's open to the broader program today at 4:30 in the Hofstra University Museum of Art. Adjunct Assistant Professor of Drama and Dance Carol Copeland will deliver both a lecture and a demonstration alongside three Hofstra students, Abdul, Ashi, and Moira, and that lecture and demonstration are entitled Dancing in Revolutionary America. So again, 4:30 this afternoon over at the Hofstra Museum. So at its core, today's program asks us to reconsider those stories and how they are told, and by whom they are told, and by whose voices are included, and by whose voices are all too often left out. And that question is really fundamental, not only to scholarship, but to democracy itself. Democracy, as we all know, depends on the full and honest accounting of our shared past. It requires that we listen to voices that have been marginalized, that have been silenced, and have been overlooked, and that we recognize that these perspectives are not peripheral, but rather essential to telling the full story. The histories of Haiti and Latin America and the revolutionary movements they shaped remind us of that struggle for freedom, for agency, and dignity that has always been the broader, more complex, and more interconnected goal than our traditional narratives may suggest. And so as a university, this is precisely the work that each of us is called to do. In Hofstra's strategic plan, Hofstra 100, we reaffirm our commitment to an inclusive scholarly community where free inquiry flourishes, where diverse perspectives are not only welcomed, but are actively engaged, and where knowledge is truly created in partnership with the communities which we serve. These values, belonging, community, discovery, integrity, at Hofstra, they're not abstract ideals. They're foundational to programs such as the one you're attending today. And these events also reflect our growing emphasis on community-engaged scholarship, work that connects academic inquiry with real-world issues and advances democratic practice in meaningful and truly tangible ways. So today, it's not just about revisiting history, it's about expanding it. It's about ensuring that the stories we tell and the ones that we elevate reflect the full richness of human experience. And there's nothing more important than that. So thank you for being part of this conversation. Really looking forward to and thank our speakers. And with that, it's my great pleasure to turn the podium over to Sally Charno, who is the chair of the history department. Sally, it is all yours. And as I tell everyone, I'm modeling good behavior. I'm not going to jump down for two reasons. One, I shouldn't do it, and two, at my age, I might hurt something.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Provost Barragan. Thank you. I'm not going to use the mic. I'm just going to speak from down here since we're an intimate mic. Oh, we get it through the board in Europe. Oh, this one will be good. Good afternoon. I'm just going to, for 1 minute, introduce Brenda Elsey, who's curating our event this afternoon with Professor Millery Polyné. Just to say a few words, almost everyone here knows Professor Elsey, Professor of History, Latin American Studies, Politics, Sports, and Gender. So you know that part about her. You know that she wrote a fantastic book called Citizens and Sportsmen, Football and Politics in 20th Century Chile, followed up by another monograph, Futbolera, A History of Women and Sports in Latin America. But what you may not know, and which I think is super interesting, is that in 2019, Brenda Elsey joined the FARE Network, and that FARE, Football Against Racism in Europe. And she joined that network to lead the development in American soccer and governing bodies. Elsey was a monitor for discrimination during the 2022 World Cup, and she's written on sports and social justice for publications such as The New Republic, The New York Times, and Sports Illustrated, and has been a consistent voice on National Public Radio. She co-hosts the podcast Burn It Down alongside Shireen Ahmed, Amira Rose Davis, Lindsay Gibbs, and Jessica Luther. And according to Aziz Michelle Burton, it was the first feminist sports podcast to analyze sports culture from an intersectional feminist lens. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Professor Brenda Elsey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for that nice introduction. Thank you for being here despite this weather, or maybe because of this weather, unclear on your feelings. And thank you for all the support that the Cultural Center has given to this whole program, to Professor Charnow, to always Provost Riordan. I mean, it's a lot of resources that can go to extracurricular events, and they can have enormous benefits. Oh, and to political science, Calico School, Professor Fritz, Professor Bose, all of the departments, we work together, and it's really beneficial. So thank you, and I hope I didn't leave anyone out. Okay, so we're talking about untold stories, and what's funny, and you'll learn a lot more about this from the speaker in just a moment, who I'm about to introduce. You know, in the history of Latin American independence, if you're thinking about the 19th century and Simón Bolívar, Haiti was very central to those efforts. And maybe some of you have been in my class, or Professor Charnows might know that, but I'm speaking to the general public, right? Simón Bolívar, out of weapons, out of money, out of hope, found himself searching for it in Haiti, and there he found solidarity and help in the effort to liberate the South American republics from the Spanish. So when is it untold? When does it become untold? What ways in which it's told is a really fascinating topic. For South American independence leaders, Haiti offered a different model than the United States. The United States was also very important, but it shaped their sense of abolition. It sort of created an exciting possibility of what an abolitionist movement could look like when melded with a nationalist and independent one. So I'm really excited to introduce today Dr. Millery Polyné. He is associate professor at the Gallatin School at New York University, where he teaches Latin American and Caribbean history. He's author of From Douglas to Duvalier, U.S. African Americans, Haiti, and Pan-Americanism, 1870 to 1964, because historians love all that part after the colon. That was published by University of Florida Press. He's also edited The Idea of Haiti, Rethinking Crisis and Development, and co-edited The Haiti Reader from Duke University Press, which is an invaluable resource if you're interested in any primary sources about Haiti or the historiographical tradition around it. He's a recipient of the National Endowment for the Humanities, Schomburg Scholar in Residence Fellowship, and his work has appeared in numerous outlets, both scholarly journals and public-facing publications. Professor Polyné grapples with the conundrum of Haitian history's exceptionalism and its inspiration that exists alongside the country's ostracism and persecution internationally. I mentioned we have a friend in common. He's a well-known Haitian historian, Laurent Dubois, who's at University of Virginia, and we were texting about soccer and the Haitian team. We're pretty pumped that they qualified, and I mentioned to him actually that Millery was coming to speak to us, and he sent this. I'd just like to quote from his text. He says, quote, "Millery, exclamation point. His work and thinking has illuminated the deep connections between the histories of the U.S. and Haiti." This is how my friends text. And through his writing and his leadership, he has constantly opened up spaces for reimagining and reconfiguring that relationship, which I thought was beautiful. So welcome to Professor Polyné, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Look at this good practice. Everyone, safety techniques. Take note, fire marshals. I'm going to turn this off now.
Oh my God, I made it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Brenda Elsey, Dr. Sally Charno, and Hofstra University. This is really amazing for you to come on such a gorgeous day. We've had such a rough winter, so I appreciate. Many of you probably had to come because it's class and it's attendance, but nonetheless, I appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to be with us. All right, give me 1 second, please. All right. All right. All right. So, let me go to slideshow. And we get started. All right. So, the Haitian Declaration of Independence was one of the most radical founding documents in the modern Atlantic world. It did not merely announce a new state established by a majority of African-born people, right? And that's something that's so sort of mind-boggling and incredible to hear. So I'll repeat it again. It did not merely announce a new state established by a majority of African-born people. It declared that a society created through the violent system of Atlantic slavery would be remade through emancipation, sovereignty, and the refusal of French, Spanish, and British domination. So from what Professor Elsey has relayed to me, your class, and also Dr. Charno, has covered some of the important aspects of the Haitian Revolution. So during the Q&A, I'm happy to think further with you about the events and the historical impact of the revolution. However, my brief talk today is really about the moment of declaration as we think about 250 years of the of American U.S. independence. My brief talk today is really about the moment of declaration, January 1st, 1804, and what it means and how it was remembered. As the United States embarks upon the 250th year of its independence in July, how can we participate in a critical reflection of the meaning of sovereignty? How does one wrestle with what historians have called the age of revolutions? And at the same time engage in contemporary politics that shape the lives of American citizens, in addition to the people who live and work in the United States, who seek to gain a protected status in this country and desire to live with dignity. What role does Haiti play in commemorating America's 250th? And how does the state shape our understanding of the Declaration of Independence? How does the state shape our understanding of the Declaration of Independence and of sovereignty, which is so central to our national identity? So as we think about memory and commemoration, I want to show you this important painting by Ernst Prophète, a painter, Haitian painter, born in Cap-Haïtien in 1950. So unfortunately, I have this image, not unfortunately, but this is of, this image right here is the image I wanted to show you. This wonderful, beautiful painting is in private hands, private ownership, and it's unfortunately very sort of difficult to find on the web. And so I took it from Dr. Malik Gaycom's book cover of a few years back. And so I wanted for us to sort of look at this painting here. It's completed in 1999. Prophète's image depicts Jean-Jacques Dessalines at the center of a group of generals in a town square in Gonaïves, proclaiming the nation's sovereignty. Jean-Jacques Dessalines at the center, holding the Declaration of Independence. The mass of this is in Gonaïves. I'll show you a map, which is sort of the western part of the island. Haitians, now called Haitians, raising their hands in pride and victory. Off to the right of the image, you barely sort of see it here. You see a sea of Haitians here, Haitians here. Off to the right of the image, you see some lighter skinned Haitians in sort of right below the palm tree leaves. The artist paints, as I just mentioned, a group of lighter-skinned people, possibly representing the gens de couleur, the free people of color of Saint-Domingue, who, as you may remember from your conversations, operated in this in-between space in the colony. Prophète, the painter, makes clear comments on the politics of color in Saint-Domingue and Haiti. And I think this is really interesting in terms of thinking about the politics of color and the ways in which so these gradations of color that happens throughout the Caribbean and Latin America play a very important part in sort of access to resources and one sort of social mobility and things of that nature. The gens de couleur second-class status in Saint-Domingue, Prophète is also talking about, in addition to thinking about the gens de couleurs, sort of the shifting politics of allegiance to power, specifically to France, at times, and at times the maintenance of slavery and their call for increased rights. So the gens de couleur are this group of people who are able to own slaves in Saint-Domingue. They're able to own property, but they're also asking for to gain more rights, to be equal to the whites and the plantocracy within Saint-Domingue. Okay, so this powerful image captures the triumph and defiance of Haitian independence and the establishment of Black self-rule. Haiti would go through in the 1930s and 40s and 50s this period in which Haitian officials and Haitian rulers would be all pretty much lighter skinned. But there was a moment in terms of the 1940s and 1950s in which that shifted. And so these sort of color politics play a very critical role in us thinking about sort of the rule and the governance of the Haitian state, but also the ways in which darker skinned peoples within Haiti also tried to find access and ways to obtain power within the country. And so these sort of early problems and issues of color politics all have this sort of earlier history. So at the same time as Gacom, the author of this text, states, this painting is pervaded, quote, pervaded by a hardship and even menacing awareness of loss, tragedy, violence, and persecution. So in one instance, absolutely a very momentous, happy moment for that is displayed here. But at the same time, one must also think about loss, tragedy, violence, and persecution. Haiti's independence emerged from a revolution that defeated one of the strongest empires of the era and made Haiti the first independent Black republic in the Western Hemisphere. The language of the Declaration of Independence is dramatic and uncompromising. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read the Declaration of Independence in your classes, but it insists on independence or death, frames freedom as something won through sacrifice, and warns that the institution of slavery must never return. That makes the Declaration more than a legal act. It is a moral and political manifesto about the meaning of freedom after slavery. It marked a decisive break with the Northern Atlantic revolutions of the United States and France because it made abolition, racial equality, and sovereignty from slavery the basis of statehood. The basis of statehood. And so the first Independence Day on January 1st, 1804, set the pattern for later commemorations. Dessalines used public reading of the Declaration, military displays, speeches, and symbolic spaces like the altar of the homeland to turn sovereignty into a shared national ritual that could reach both elite and non-elite Haitians. It did more than celebrate victory. It helped define who belonged to the new state and what citizens owed to it. What do they owe? Obedience of the masses is what Dessalines wanted. Military loyalty and continued defense of its independence. You see just images of sort of, they call this sort of the triumvirate of some degree. Dessalines in the middle, Toussaint Louverture, the other Haitian leader, and Alexandre Pétion to the far left. Yeah. It also mattered to the people because the public celebration allowed them to participate in a new national identity, even when many could not read the printed declaration. The Declaration was first an oral proclamation. Then it became a printed text. And now, as you've seen before, sort of representations as this artistic image, which shows that it functioned as an event, a document, and also a performance. Dessalines was not the sole author of the text. While Dessalines was clearly the political instigator and approved the Declaration, he was probably not the composer in any strict sense, because he was also illiterate, or nearly so, as some have argued, and relied on his secretaries, especially, as you see here, Louis-Félix Boiron-Tonnerre, who is, for many sort of leading scholars of Haiti, seen as really the author of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration is this radical document, but it is also an unusual text in a few particular ways. It came at the end rather than the beginning of the revolution, all right? It came at the end rather than the beginning of the revolution. As we know, the beginning of the revolution starts in 1791. It did not establish a republic. This particular document did not say, we are now the Haitian Republic, or using that particular term, republic. The Declaration of Independence does not make any references to rights. And it was not one text, but two declarations issued at different moments and context. Dessalines was interested in the language of law, and he repeatedly invokes laws and free individuality and the need to sever Haiti from French legal and social power. So let's go quickly to the text. I wanted to go straight to the Declaration of Independence. It says, "The French name still haunts our country. Everything here is a reminder of the cruelty of that barbarous people. Our laws, our customs, our towns all still bear a French imprint. More than this, there still exist French people on our island. And you believe that you are free and independent of that republic? For 14 years, we have been the victims of our own gullibility and tolerance, defeated not by French arms, by the pitiful eloquence of their official proclamations. When, therefore, shall we tire of breathing the same air as they do?" I want to go on to another text and sort of explain a little bit. Towards the end of the text of the Declaration, Tonnerre asserts, "We must not let, however, a spirit of proselytism destroy our creation. Let us leave our neighbors in peace to live tranquilly under the laws they have made for themselves. We should not set ourselves up as lawmakers for the Caribbean, and, like headstrong revolutionaries, take pride in disturbing the calm of the islands that surround us. They have not been drenched in the innocent blood of their inhabitants like ours has been. They have no need to seek vengeance against the power that protects them." I want for us to sort of think about, okay, what's being said here? What kind of maneuvering, what kind of language is being used? In what ways is this Declaration of Independence also making other kinds of political statements and kinds of sort of warnings to not just people within the nation, but in what ways are they also having a conversation with people outside of the nation, to the greater Caribbean, to the United States, right? On one hand, law, as we interpret in this document, promised a clean rupture from the Black Code, the Code Noir, and colonial slavery. And so that is clear within that first statement. On the other, Haiti still had to govern labor, had to govern property and foreign relations in a hostile Atlantic order. Right? So I want us to think, okay, why would Haiti still be seen as hostile, right, within the Atlantic world? What does this new this new moment of independence? How is that sort of represented? How do people see this moment? How does it impact plantation owners in the U.S. South or within South America or other parts of the Caribbean, right next door to Saint Domingue, within the Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo? The establishment of sovereignty caused significant problems with foreign relations. So as I was thinking about that and thinking about foreign relations, so what does the meaning of the Declaration of Independence mean for how they plan to, if they're a nation, what kind of foreign relationship, diplomatic relationship do they want with the world? What kind of relationship will they have with France or with Britain or the United States? And so there's a scholar at William and Mary, Julia Gaffield, who's done some really wonderful work on the Haitian Declaration of Independence and on Haiti. And in one of her research essays, she focuses on the tension between the vibrant economic activity of American merchants and the official policy of diplomatic non-recognition by the U.S. government. So this becomes really important because American merchants are, once they hear that Haiti is free, they are ready and they go down and they're ready to trade with Haitians, with the new Haitian government. But President Thomas Jefferson had a policy of ignoring Haiti. But you had, as I said, American merchants from cities like Baltimore, Providence, Charleston, South Carolina, Philadelphia, immediately treated Haiti as an independent nation. But you have the president, Thomas Jefferson, said, we don't recognize. So Haiti became this primary trade partner for the U.S., for U.S. merchants, exchanging coffee and cotton for provisions and war materials. While trade flourished initially, the U.S. government eventually passed a bill in 1806 making trade with Haiti absolutely illegal. And this was driven by French diplomatic pressure, as the U.S. sought French support for the acquisition of Florida. And fears among, as I mentioned before, Southern congressmen that Haitian independence would incite slave uprisings in the United States. Because the government remained silent on Haiti's status, the U.S. court system was forced to decide if the island was a country or a colony. Who are you? You say you're free, but we have all these other interests. So in cases like Clark v. the United States, the judges ruled that because the U.S. government had prohibited trade with rebellious ports, it had effectively declared that Haiti was still a dependency of France, according to the U.S. government. And so when American property was seized by Haitian leaders such as Henri Christophe or Jean-Pierre Boyer, merchants, you have American merchants, as I mentioned, from various different cities are like, Haitian government's taking our property. They're messing with our money over here. And they're going to the U.S. government saying, it's your job to protect us. And so that becomes an issue, thinking about recognition, thinking about politics. Haitian leaders often refused to settle these claims unless the U.S. granted formal diplomatic recognition, effectively using American merchants as leverage in this international diplomacy. So we see that the Declaration of Independence sort of creates this very ambiguous place in American foreign policy. Haitian diplomats and leaders understood that labels and titles were paramount. These are people formerly enslaved, African-born, majority of them, who are claiming and are saying, Jean-Jacques Dessalines calls himself Emperor of Haiti. All these various different officials are wearing and are very proud of the titles that they hold. All right? So they often refuse to receive American agents or settle debts if the correspondence was addressed to them as just general rather than president or emperor or king, insisting that trade must come with the respect due a sovereign nation. So I also want us to think about sort of respect in different ways and how that sort of links with the establishment of the nation. I want to quickly go on to Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint Louverture's 1801 Constitution. So we remember, so we're going to go back a little bit. We have a Declaration of Independence, but there is a Haitian Constitution in 1801, earlier, 3 years earlier, which abolished slavery, banned racial discrimination, and guaranteed equal treatment under the law, while still imagining some connection to France. Toussaint still wanted to maintain relations, almost like a protectorate to some degree, like a France's, U.S. to Puerto Rico or France to Guadeloupe and Martinique. Okay, that's what Toussaint wanted. However, as you see, the French wanted other things, right? So this means that Haitian statehood developed in reverse of the American case. Constitution first, independence later. Dessalines' declaration was addressed to both domestic and foreign audiences, and that carefully avoided becoming a call to export revolution to neighboring slave societies. So if you remember from that previous sort of writing from the Declaration of Independence towards the end of that document, you see ways in which Tonnerre and Dessalines are basically saying, we've established independence. This is not something that we're trying to export. You don't have to worry about us. Let's find a way that we can work together in order to continue and establish diplomatic and economic financial relations. So in the aftermath, law mattered because Haiti had to build a new regime without the legal architecture of slavery. Yet it could not simply erase the past. It also mattered because it confronted a problem that many revolutionary declarations avoided. How to found a nation after slavery had structured every part of social life. The declaration spoke not only to France and to the army leaders gathered around Dessalines, but also to a broader public that had lived through war, terror, and emancipation. In that sense, it was both a break with the colonial order and an attempt to create a new collective identity out of revolutionary violence. So commemorating independence in Haiti was never just a ceremony. It was, as I mentioned before, a political act that helped make the Haitian nation, authorize governments, and keep revolutionary memory alive among the Haitian people. One clear example is this sort of repeated public reading of the Declaration of Independence every year. And so this is in Gonaïves. You saw the earlier painting by Ernst Prophète. Dessalines is standing on sort of what they call the altar of the homeland. And so this is a more modern version. This is a contemporary a monument to Dessalines and the people and the fighters of the revolution. And so every year there was a public reading of the Declaration of Independence, first in Gonaïves and then in later celebrations at Cap-Haïtien in the north and Marchand. These performances are really important. They cross language and literacy barriers. Since the spoken ceremony was in Haitian Creole and the military procession could include soldiers and townspeople and peasants, countryside residents, not just the French reading elite, right? So this is a way in which these kinds of sort of performances and commemorations are really interesting, right? Oftentimes, many times, in Haitian Creole and not in French. However, the document itself was never, for a long time, not translated into Haitian Creole. For the government, the ritual made independence visible and memorable, and it linked loyalty to state authority with loyalty to the revolutionary past. For the people, the event turned independence into a lived experience rather than a distant legal text. Thinking about living the experience of declaration, this being performed every year. So thinking about what kinds of performances do we participate in every year that sort of binds our identity to this space. So from the late 1820s to the early 1840s, there was minimal commemorative events. So you had many events between 1804 and about 1820. Then it sort of died off because various other Haitian presidents and leaders were like, no, this is about me. We're not thinking about revolutionary leaders anymore. And so many scholars call this sort of an official forgetting of Emperor Jean-Jacques Dessalines. However, with the revolution of 1843 and the downfall of President Jean-Pierre Boyer, opened up a new era in which leaders again used the memory of independence to justify government change. And petitions from citizens to push the state to honor Dessalines publicly. There was an official funeral service. Dessalines was assassinated in 1806. But there was never a funeral service, but there was an official funeral service for Dessalines in 1845, and later naming of January 2nd as Jean-Jacques Dessalines Day in Haiti under President Soulouk. It shows how commemorations could legitimize Black political power and connect rulers to the founder of independence. So you see ways in which politicians, Haitian officials are utilizing the memories of of revolutionary leaders to validate their own regime. So this, as I say, this mattered to the Haitian government because honoring Dessalines helped to stabilize regimes and claim revolutionary legitimacy. It mattered to the people because it restored a hero who had remained alive in popular memory through mourning, oral history, and also Vodou traditions, Vodou being the religion of the masses of Haitians. Vodou songs constitute the largest body of Creole language, literature, and scholars like Laurent Dubois argue that Vodou songs function as a form of history writing. So remember, many of these documents are written in French, but Vodou songs that are being sung in various, rituals and ceremonies, these songs are sung in Creole. And this becomes a way in which the voice of the people is sort of remembered, and ways in which scholars are sort of looking at how can we get a sense of what life was like and who the people were and things of that nature. Through by accessing their own voice. And so many scholars are sort of looking at this sort of particular kind of method. So numbering in the tens of thousands, these songs are not merely religious relics, they are elusive and hermetic texts that condense historical experience into spiritual references. The connective tissue between Vodou, and independence is perhaps most visible in the transformation of Jean-Jacques Dessalines into a loi. And if you know anything about Vodou is the religion of the people, as I mentioned before, but it is within Vodou you have various different deities or lois. All right, within the Vodou pantheon. And the people, the practitioners who participate within Vodou utilize these deities, similar to saints to some degree, and you go through various practices and rituals in order to solve everyday problems. You would try to pray to and to perform various rituals for these various different lois. And Jean-Jacques Dessalines became one of these lois. Known as Ogou Dessalines, he is integrated into the Ogou family of spirits associated with war and the military. This spiritual canonization allows the Haitian people to process on the dual nature of their leaders as heroic liberators who are also potentially threatening autocrats. One well-known song describes Dessalines bringing a wanga nouveau, a new fetish, a new spiritual power. A wanga is like a charm, right? In the form of muskets and bullets and cannons to chase away the whites. This suggests that popular memory viewed independence as a result of a potent new combination of spiritual power and modern weaponry. You have another Vodou song that refers to Dessalines as the Taureau d'Haïti, the bull of Haiti, a title that celebrates his power while also simultaneously foreshadowing his sacrifice. In Vodou, bulls are the primary sacrifice for Ogou, the god of war, as I mentioned, in the military. And thus the song recognizes that the leader who achieved independence was ultimately chopped down and sacrificed shortly after. So here's just, unfortunately, I don't have the actual song for this, but here are the lyrics that have been translated by another really amazing and some new scholars, Benjamin Hebelwaith, who've been assembling and collecting many of these songs. This was a song that was collected a bit earlier, but Benjamin has put this all in a book. All right. I'll just quickly read it. Toussaint died badly. He wasn't afraid to die badly. Dessalines is the bull of Haiti. I've got no mother, no father. They tried to kill my whole race. They didn't kill me. Toussaint died badly. He wasn't afraid to die badly. Dessalines is the bull of Haiti. That day, this has been said before. Dessalines is an Ougan. This has been said before. And an Ougan is essentially the sort of head priest of a temple within the Vodou religion. And so this is something that's coming circa the 1950s. And so these songs that have been collected are telling a story. And as I mentioned before, as Laurent says, a kind of history writing. So really quickly, a third example is the 1904 centennial of independence as the fullest recovery of Dessalines' memory in the national pantheon. The Association du Centenaire, backed by the state, organized conferences, pilgrimage to Dessalines' grave, newspaper campaigns, public ceremonies that culminated in a renewed oath at Gonaïves. Just going back to that image within Gonaïves here. This is another angle. So again, these kinds of commemorations that are about ways in which many new Haitian leaders are trying to legitimize their power, to gain access to certain populations within Haiti. This becomes really important. So this centennial mattered to the government because it helped an embattled regime claim legitimacy through continuity with the founding revolution and with Black leadership. It mattered to Haitian people because it gave public form to a long-standing admiration for Dessalines and created space for civic groups, intellectuals, and ordinary readers to participate in a national remembrance. So, independence in Haiti survived not only through battle and law, but through repeated acts of remembrance. The public reading of the Declaration, the 1845 revival of Dessalines, and the 1904 centennial all show that commemoration helped Haiti's governments claim authority while giving Haitians a shared language of freedom, sacrifice, and national pride. Commemoration in Haiti was never just ceremonial. It was a political tool used to shape memory, authority, and nationhood. Dessalines turned January 1st into Haiti's first national holiday, and the early celebrations mixed public readings and military parades and speeches and drums and dances to make independence visible to a diverse population. Because the Declaration was in French, but the public rituals could cross language barriers, commemoration helped to convert a revolutionary elite project into a shared national history. Over time, the meaning of the holiday changed with politics. After Dessalines' assassination in 1806, official memory initially pushed him aside, casting him as a tyrant, as an autocrat, while newer leaders tried to build legitimacy for themselves. But as I mentioned before, popular memory never disappeared. You have oral traditions, Vodou associations, you have grave visits, and mourning practices that kept Dessalines' spirit alive outside of state control. That is the power of commemoration. It does not simply preserve the past, it selects heroes, edits conflicts, and tells people which histories deserve public honor. In Haiti, independence celebrations became a way to argue over race, class, region, political legitimacy, while also reaffirming that Haiti existed as a sovereign nation. The holiday endured because Haitians kept using it to answer a very hard question. Who founded the nation? And what kind of freedom did they win? My hope is that we could talk a little bit more about that. So we see the 250th anniversary of the U.S. independence should be an occasion for critical reflections. I'm really happy that that Hofstra University has chosen to do this. It's about critical reflection. It's not about self-congratulations. Americans should be thinking about the Haitian independence as part of the same revolutionary Atlantic world that produced the United States, not as a footnote to it. Haiti was the second independent nation in the Americas, and its revolution exposed the contradiction at the heart of Atlantic liberty. A republic of freedom could exist alongside slavery, and Haiti destroyed that contradiction by force. That makes Haitian independence central to any serious understandings of the age of revolution. The relationship also matters because the United States and Haiti has long been entangled. The United States helped shape the international environment around Haitian independence, and U.S. attitudes toward Haiti were often marked by fear of the slave revolt, racial prejudice, and as I mentioned before, a diplomatic hesitation. So this key document of the Age of Revolutions was not only a birth certificate for a new nation. Haiti's long tradition of commemorating independence shows how nations keep reinventing themselves through ritual, through mourning and celebration. And for Americans preparing to mark 250 years of independence, Haiti is not an optional side story. So I'm really happy that we see this here. It is one of the clearest mirrors available for understanding what revolution and national memory actually mean. Thank you, everyone. So hopefully we got some time. We do? All right. All right, good.
So should we have students first with questions? How about we do that? I think you can use either of. Does this work now? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Come on up.
Hit me.
Oh no! Oh
You go. Thank you very much. I'm going to pull this up a little bit. Thank you very much for a very insightful, wonderful presentation for everyone who made this possible. I'm just curious if we could have some more context about the altar of the homeland, because it seems like a really interesting concept, but I'm just not familiar with it personally.
Yeah. From what I know, essentially, Dessalines and the military wanted this sort of particular space, and they saw this space as sacred, and basically created. It was just essentially a wooden altar made particularly for that moment of reciting and proclaiming the two proclamations for the Declaration of Independence, and so Gonaïves became this sort of informal capital because of that sort of particular moment. And so that essentially the altar of the homeland becomes this, I'm trying to think of, what would be sort of the equivalent. That's something I got to think more about, but, these sort of sacred spaces that really identify as this is where our identity sort of begins. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much for your talk today. It was very informative. I'm in Professor Charnow's class, and I'm writing a research project about the role of women in the Haitian Revolution, particularly like in combat. And I was wondering if you had any recommendations for where to find like primary sources for that.
So that's tough. I would first look at Carolyn Fick's book. Unfortunately, it's something as you've probably already noticed, that much of the writing on the Haitian Revolution focuses primarily on the men. Many of these revolutions and the nature of history writing at a particular moment in time, quite patriarchal. What I've seen is more and more mentionings of women participating in the revolution. But I would start with Carolyn Fick, and I'm trying to remember the name of Carolyn Fick's text, F-I-C-K. It's like Stories from Below or something of that nature, but it'll come to me. So, but I would start there, and I know other books will, but unfortunately there are not a lot of books out there that really just focus on women. My sense is, you said you're in Professor Charno's class. You're reading French also?
Yeah.
All right. So then a few things. So let's connect afterwards.
Okay.
And I can. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Wonderful.
Hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I came kind of late, so if you said it, I must have missed it. But I was wondering if you could, like, this might sound strange, like, I'd like the notes for your lecture because it said a lot of things that I resonate with, and I'd like to apply to my own project. So yeah, my main question is, what is Haiti's role in the age of revolution with regards to like other countries and other places where revolutions taking place? Like I know that Simon Bolivar went there for a while, and I'm reading about the Greek Revolution, independence, and they did like provide some moral and economic support. So I was wondering about that too.
Yeah. So that's a great question. In terms of sort of Haiti's impact, from what I hear from your question, and how are people being influenced by them, right? So you got to think about sort of various different groups. So I wrote one of my first book was on this relationship between African Americans and Haitians, and that becomes a really important. African Americans and Julia Scott wrote this really wonderful book called The Common Wind that talks about sailors who are and sort of spreading the word about the revolution and how sort of U.S. Officials and planters are going to be impacted by the potential of the revolution spreading. As you may remember, this is a revolution that's 13 years, 1791 to 1804. And so you have various sort of different groups and constituencies that are thinking about how will this impact. You have African Americans who are still enslaved within the United States who are hearing these stories about a black king, who are hearing these stories about a group of Africans who have defeated the armies of the army of the French, and have also engaged with the British and also the Spanish in Santo Domingo. And so they are, without a doubt, inspired by this. And so they're finding sort of newspaper reports and various different kinds of songs and poems, and this really wonderful book called Haitian Revolutionary Fictions, where this really brilliant scholar at Yale, Marlène Daut, D-A-U-T, gathers newspaper reports and poems and plays and speeches from like 1804 all the way up to about 1850s, 1860s, in which people are writing about Toussaint, Dessalines, and thinking about the revolution. Speeches even from college students at Dartmouth and other places, which is really incredible. And so then you have obviously the plantation owners who are very fearful about this. Then you have within other parts of the Caribbean, like the French, who have just left, just been kicked out of Saint-Domingue. It's now Haiti. The Spanish, Toussaint was able to control the Dominican Republic. And so the Spanish and the French and the British and the Dutch who are still, colonial slaveholders, are worried about how will this impact us? How will this impact our empires, right? Will this revolution spread? And I'm sure as you've learned in Professor Elsie's class, in terms of within Latin America, many revolutionary leaders who, obviously Portugal and Brazil and Spain and various parts of South America, they are thinking about this world of republicanism and of abolition. And so Haiti becomes this beacon. And I don't want to go more into the story of Simón Bolívar, but many people have heard this. But you see ways in which Alexandre Pétion welcomes this delegation from was it New Granada? What do they call? Was it New Granada? Colombia and Venezuela, at the time. They welcome this delegation and say, hey, we have a place for you. We have arms, There are rumors. I still haven't sort of read the sort of original documents about Pétion basically saying, as long as you make sure that there's no slavery that ever exists on your land, then basically we're good, and we have a base for you. And this was in the southern part of Haiti. So hopefully that gives you a sense of this really sort of watershed, monumentous moment in which people throughout, not just within the Americas, but also within Europe. And I can go into a Polish delegation that was that initially came with the French, but separated from the French, and there's like 5,000 Polish soldiers who were welcomed into Haiti, and there's this group of Polish Haitian who look quite different from many Haitians, but that Polish delegation is still seen as liberators within Haiti. So,
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm also in Dr. Tarnow's class. I'm doing my research on how the embargo of 1806 was portrayed in U.S. media, specifically this one newspaper that Thomas Jefferson was the friend of the editor. So I'm looking into kind of those dynamics. But my question for you was, how was, if at all, the trade embargo by the United States viewed in Haiti or by Haitian officials, if there's any sort of primary source material for that?
Yeah, Dr. Charno wasn't kidding about great questions, so I appreciate it. No, I think this is, what I would do is, and I'm sure you can find this, is looking at Thomas Jefferson's sort of writings and sort of the printed, you may have already done that, but that's the first place I would go. I don't think there are things online at the National Archives, but there may be, but I'm sure that there's a few volumes of Thomas Jefferson's writings. That's the first place I would go. The second place I would go is thinking about David Gegus's work about the Haitian Revolution. Gegus, Geggus, and the embargo. So how Haitians responded to it. 1806. I would also go to Julia Gaffield's work, who her book Haitian Connections, Julia Gaffield, the professor I mentioned at William & Mary. So those are three places I would go. Gaffield's Haitian Connections, because she talks about that moment, and more and more scholarship is being written now about that post 1804 period between 1804 and 1820, but for a long time, most scholars just really concentrated on the Haitian Revolution, and there were people like me that looked at sort of U.S. occupation onward, and so once you look through Gaffield's work and the bibliography and the footnotes, which I hope you are excited about, you'll definitely begin to see the connections.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm also a student of Dr. Charnow's, but
You set me up.
I am also in Dr. Elsie's Latin American and Caribbean
Okay.
Studies introductory class.
Yeah.
So my research project is sort of focusing on the gens de couleur and the concept of like rights and citizenship for them. So I was wondering if there were sort of any noticeable patterns in people's backgrounds and their opinions on the matter.
On the revolution, on slavery,
On abolition and on the concept of who was considered a citizen, political citizenship versus natural rights in terms
Yeah.
of free people of color.
Yeah. So you want to know if there was I don't know, maybe a document maybe written, or did they all sort of agree on the same?
Yeah, sort of I guess a better way to phrase it would be what were the differing perspectives, I guess, on who should have what rights and like where to find sources on that.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think this is a really fascinating sort of issue and topic, because you have the gens de couleur, as I mentioned, this sort of in-betweenness, right? And here, so you have some free people of color who are educated in France, so depending upon their relationship and if they were they able to were they able to free themselves? Were they freed by manumission, by a slaveholder saying, leaving that in their will, or were they able to buy their own freedom? I think a lot of these sort of particularities speak to their relationship. Do they still know how much they know in terms of their family? Are they still connected with their family? If they've, as I mentioned before, were they educated in Paris or in other parts of Europe? Oftentimes those. And at what moment are we within the revolution? So it becomes this really tricky thing that you can't really sort of pin the free people of color down. How much property do they own? And so there's some really great sources out there that speak to the stories of free people of color, and they all have in each their own sort of relationship to abolition. Depending upon the way the revolution was going at a particular moment in time, if they saw that, and that's really the fascinating thing about the Haitian Revolution that really got me to become a historian. I was fascinated by the ways in which the Haitian masses, African-born or born in the Caribbean, not free people of color or of mixed heritage, the ways in which people switch sides. So I was going to write my dissertation on deception and the ways in which, depending upon sort of the political winds, you'll find that Haitians would move over to the side of the French, and because they think they could get a little bit more. And then, so that's the same thing that's happening with the gens de couleur. So I think I maybe have answered some of your question, but I think you're looking for sources too.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I got some work to do. So I got some sources. I would definitely Laurent Dubois' Slavery. He has a little short book of primary documents about slavery in the Caribbean. I think he co-edited that with someone else. That's a place I would look. I would also look at Gegas, Haitian revolutionary documents, also primary documents.
Can I add one?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, let me give you a break. There's a great dissertation by a person whose life got in the way of her finishing the book. And her name's Evie Falobella at Stony Brook. Have you ever read it on exactly that question? That might have a lot of good primary sources. So I went to graduate school with her, and like a lot of people it's an exhausting process that not everyone finishes the book after. They're too exhausted from it. She's still at UPenn, but not working on Haiti anymore. And so Yvonne Falabella, good source.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to bring my bibliography.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm also in Dr. Jordan's class. Just like a general question about the revolution. Like, did it have like sort of like a ripple effect throughout like the Atlantic, like in regards to like the idea of slavery?
The potential of slavery, right? The not the potential of slavery, but the potential of freedom, the potential of liberty. Michel Rolfe-Trouillot writes this. I think some of you may have read the Silencing of the Past, summary, right? And so, Trouillot talks about this unthinkable history, this unthinkable moment, and how for a long time historians and people didn't write about it, right? Or it didn't sort of make its way into sort of the popular imaginary, even though, as we saw from, as I mentioned before, Marlene Doe's Haitian revolutionary fiction, she found all this work in which people were actually writing about it. But in terms of historians, it was something that you didn't have a corpus, a body of work on the Haitian Revolution from major either U.S. or French historians, really until Yeah.
The 90s.
Yeah. And so when we think about this moment, Trouillot reminds us that it was unthinkable, which tells you a lot about the colonial world. It tells you a lot about there was a belief system that this could not even be possible, that Africans, blacks who were born in the New World could control or run their own nation, could be free. And so when we think about this moment, I think that's the one thing I would sort of have you wrestle with and think about is its influence and power. Even though these ideas were sort of making its way through rumor and through stories, obviously within the Haitian Revolution, you have this mass migration of people who are going to Cuba, going to various parts of the Caribbean, going to Baltimore and New Orleans, a huge influence within New Orleans. And so this migration is spreading the story. And people are very much worried about how will this potentially, impact me from an African American's perspective, from it's a long story with regards to the Dominican Republic, but with regards to Santo Domingo and the Dominican Republic, they look at this as a problem. You have a moment in which, because Toussaint has taken over the entire island of Hispaniola, you have a moment in which it's controlled by all of Haitian, by the Haitian government. And, the Dominican Republic, they celebrate their independence from Haiti, even though, slavery was abolished in Hispaniola. And so the really fascinating thing is, okay, what angle will you sort of be looking at, from a Dominican point of view, from a Venezuela, New Granada sort of point of view, from United States point of view, thinking about class, thinking about race, thinking about gender. So it's really fascinating. So hopefully that answers a little bit of your question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And the Brazilians, terrified of Haiti. So it probably slows any sort of independence movement, Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, of course.
I'm
Professor Terazawa.
Sorry, I'm not a student, but
Aren't we all though? Yeah.
I'm Yuki Terazawa. I teach Japanese history in the history department. I'm interested in, given the fact that I'm assuming that the vast majority of people in Haiti at the time, like plantation workers and then the lower class people, were illiterate.
Yeah.
What, beyond independence and then freedom, what was their understanding about this constitution?
Yeah. Their understanding of the Constitution was about this notion of obedience, because what happens is about obedience, but it's also they wanted to not become a nation. There are some really important scholars, of course I'm forgetting now, but who are saying that the Haitian masses, what they wanted to return to was subsistence, small plot farming, and this notion of a Haiti, this is something that is an elite sort of imaginary. All right, that's coming from Dessalines, coming from the various generals. They gained power, and this speaks to the colonial order, but also speaks to the products or the citizens or the people who have suffered under the colonial order. Because Dessalines is like, all right, here, what are the ways in which I can control and strengthen power? I need to have my soldiers and my military obedient to me. How do I get them to be faithful? It is about, here are parcels of land for you, for all the various generals. And so this starts a process of sort of elite land ownership, owning large parcels of land. And so everyday Haitians who want to return to normalcy, or some version of that, find family members, or just return to subsistence farming, for a period of time, they're like, I don't want to work for a nation. I want to be able to take care of my own family. But however, the Haitian government, the newly established Haitian government, was like, no, we are a nation, and in order to be considered a nation with respect, we have to now force you to work for the nation and to supply, not just for yourselves, but for the country in order to export, right? So that becomes, hopefully that answers a little bit of your question of what the Haitian masses' response is we want to return to subsistence farming. We want to live our own lives. We don't understand what this new Haiti is, but this is something in which the Haitian government has to then establish within the minds of the people. And this unfortunately happens through force. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think Rashad's got another question.
Yeah, sorry for keeping you here longer. I noticed a lot of similarities with what's happened in Greece, in that it was a very pastoral economy, and there was really no notion of Greece in the modern sense. As one of the ways that Greece was able to build a country, a nation out of their revolution was through exported ideas of constitutionalism and central government that was brought by educated diaspora. How, I guess, what did Haiti do? You just talked about it, but talk about more, how did they manage to build a nation out of that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. How did they manage to build a nation? So, as I mentioned before, is that it's through forced labor. And what I mean by that is, all right, we need to establish an export economy. We know that we have the ways in which our people are skilled is through coffee, sugar, and various other sort of cash crop. So that has to be sort of maintained, if not increased. And that is, as I mentioned, done through force, which means that the military, the generals that you saw, standing right next to Dessalines, have to enforce this kind of sort of new labor system. And so that becomes sort of one way. And we mentioned, because of this idea of slavery potentially coming back, various different Haitian leadership wanted to strengthen the military. So strengthening the military becomes another sort of major sort of aspect. The relationship between merchants, sort of everyday merchants who, the rum merchant or the cotton or someone who needs indigo for various sort of clothing aspects, they're interested in the Caribbean and they are willing and important traders. And so that establishment is also necessary. So I guess I'm thinking about labor. I'm thinking about the establishment of. Thinking about building a nation. Thinking about labor. Thinking about this economic system. We're thinking about sort of culturally. Newspapers. Various people being educated in various parts of the world. Various infrastructure becomes critical, and that happens through diplomatic relations. Now, with regards to Haiti, this becomes an issue because they don't get recognized from the United States officially until 1860s. France doesn't recognize them until 1820s. So between 1804 and 1820, 1860s, you have various different nations who are very skeptical about their relationship. And obviously, you may have heard about the indemnity that Haiti has to pay France. This is a debt in which they entered into relations with the French government and saying, hey, the French are like, yeah, I know you had a revolution. We lost a lot of property. It's a lot of money involved. We need to be compensated. We will only compensate you if you pay us. And so some people argue that this becomes a moment in which Haiti's debt to various nations and to France sort of begins. So I think to answer your question really quickly is that one is complicated, and two, thinking how Haitian leadership wanted to build a nation had very much to do with controlling the labor system and controlling the economic system. And they were quite successful, being able to pay off debt and forcing laborers to produce over the next 50, 60 years. Haiti did actually quite well. New scholarship is coming out that they did quite well. Things made a quick turn in the late 19th century into the 20th century with U.S. occupation, but it was a very, very long and arduous road.
I guess not to pull this out too long, but in Greece there was a kind of back and forth between civilian and military government because all the real power and money was with land magnates and military men, and there was a kind of push and pull between civilian government and a military government.
So just because everybody's got to go, can we just answer this right after? I am sure, and so that we can thank Professor Polyné.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And then, not to cut you off, Rashad, he'll be here. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming. Don't forget the marvelous stuff going on at the museum and the dance and the exhibition related to this. Thank you so much for coming.